even in those samples from Antarctica, they were finding caffeine, nicotine. So everywhere these chemicals are being found, even where you wouldn't imagine them to be.
Welcome to Ascend Your Story, where we talk to people in science, tech and research from the Ascent Media studio in the sunniest place on earth, Sunshine, in Melbourne's west, on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. I'm Sam O'Reilly, the director at Ascent Media, and after decades of filming, building radio studios and recording podcasts for others, it's super exciting to be here to bring the show to you. We've met many scientists, researchers and technologies on our shoots over the years who are doing amazing work that is being unheard, so we decided to create this podcast to help get their stories out there. We love water here at Ascent Media. I mean, some of my best friends are about 60% water. It quenches my thirst, cools me down when it's hot, and is fun to go scuba diving in, and that's where my knowledge stops. Today's guest is here to tell us more about it. He's a PhD candidate at Deakin University in Melbourne, working at the crossroads of environmental science and analytical chemistry. His research looks at chemical pollution and how everyday people can play a part in tackling it. He's leading a national program called Pesticide Watch, which gets local communities involved in testing their nearby freshwater streams for pesticide contamination. It's all a part of his broader PhD project, exploring the impact and potential of community science in managing environmental challenges. Brady Hamilton, welcome to Ascend Your Story.
Thanks for having me.
Now, it sounds like we have some chemicals in our streams. How close are we to having our own version of Blinky the three-eyed fish from The Simpsons? And should we be worried about it?
Well, I think we should be worried about it. I don't think we should be too worried about mutant fish at this point. Although chemicals can cause structural changes in some creatures, so who knows how far down the line we're going to start seeing an extra eye pop up on fish.
What's a recent fact, figure, or story that's given you a new lens or blown your mind?
I think something that's really interested me is, I think since I've started this project, I've realized how recently the synthetic pesticides problem is. I think it really was something that arose after World War II. So that's sort of within the lifetime of my grandparents. So they've come from a structure of, food growing that didn't really rely too much on pesticide input. And now we've got this huge cocktail of potential contaminants in water. So I think that the recency of that problem is something that has struck me quite a lot.
Tell me about Pesticide Watch.
So Pesticide Watch is a program we've been running at Deakin for a couple of years. So we first piloted it a couple of years ago as part of my honours project. So this is, the research team is myself, Damien Callahan and Julie Mondin. And it was, the idea was to empower community groups who were already monitoring their local waterways to be able to also analyse for things like pesticides. So, of course, pesticides are a huge driver of biodiversity loss in things like waterways. So it's an issue that they wanted to be engaged with, but it's not something you can really just do an easy probe-based test by the side of a creek for. There are so many different pesticide active ingredients to analyze for. It really needs to be done with the help of things like complex instrumentation. So I think finding a way to be able to engage those people in the analysis of pesticides in their local waterways is really the aim of Pesticide Watch. Yeah.
Doesn't the EPA already do water testing?
They do some water testing, but I think that there are a lot of blind spots in terms of the data monitoring for things like pesticides in Australia. So a lot of the larger scale sort of surveys that are being done for pesticides are not for many pesticide targets. So the analyses for pesticides are generally targeted. In terms of the long-term projects that actually are in Australia, we have one in Queensland, which has been going for quite a while, called the Reef 2050 program. They've been running for, I think, about 5 years so far. Annual data collection, analysing for pesticides, but they only look for about 22 different pesticides. In terms of the number and range of different pesticides available in Australia, which could be potential contaminants, we're looking at hundreds of potential chemicals. Right. So we may know a small amount of what's going on in select creeks, usually on a small geographical scale. But in terms of a large geographical reach for a pesticide profiling program, we're not really seeing the full story yet, I don't think.
So what drew you to environmental science?
Well, I don't think it was always inevitable that I was going to head into environmental science. I had an intensely suburban upbringing. We weren't really a camping or hiking sort of family. We grew up actually in Sunshine, not too far away from here. So, and then moved out to Deer Park when I was a teenager. So we weren't involved with the local water watch groups. We had trips away, which was good. I can't really say where my love of nature came from, probably from books and television and that sort of thing. And when I hit university and started studying science, I realized that there was so much I didn't know and so much that really sparked an interest in me. For example, I knew nothing about plants, and studying botany really made me interested in that. I knew nothing about ecology or biogeography, and the lecturers I had really inspired me to sort of go down those routes. And I was a teacher for a couple of years and really was missing contributing to that sort of environmental space. And so when the opportunity came up to do an honours project with Damien, looking at something like this, that intersection between analytical chemistry and the environment, it was something that just really appealed to me.
Mm. So tell me about your PhD.
So the PhD is centered around that Pesticide Watch program, but there's a lot of work that goes into making something like that viable. Data quality is something that's really important, and being able to develop an instrumental method that is able to analyze for hundreds of different pesticides at once is a huge undertaking. So the reality is that we're at an exciting point with instrumentation for analytical chemistry, where with very little effort on the part of the operator, we're able to analyze for hundreds of different pesticides in one instrumental run. So we use a few different instruments. So they're mass spectrometers, basically. So that means that they basically analyze compounds based on their mass. So you have to separate out everything in the sample first, according to their different chemistries, and then you can detect them accurately using a mass spectrometer. So we have 3 different mass spectrometers that we use to analyze the suite of contaminants that we're interested in. So one of them is called a liquid chromatography mass spectrometer, which is better suited to semi-volatiles and non-volatile compounds. Then the other compounds, which are more volatile and more easily able to form a gas phase, they're analyzed by a GCMS, which is gas chromatography mass spectrometry. We also have a look at we're also having a look at trace elements. So you might know them better as metals. So things like heavy metals, those traditional contaminants that you think of, cadmium, lead, arsenic, those sorts of things. We're also analyzing for those using an instrument called an inductively coupled plasma mass spectrometer, which is a very impressive instrument. We've got a new one on campus this year. So I'll be also analyzing all our samples through that as well to get a better ecotoxicological profile of each sample that we get in. So developing the instrumental side of it is definitely a big component, but the important part about Pesticide Watch is it's not just a sampling campaign, it's also an education campaign. So we are wanting to do things like go out and meet the citizen scientists who are involved in our project, try to clearly communicate some of the issues around pesticides, because it is a complex space. I think it's something which people can easily simplify one way or the other, that they're not a problem at all, or that they need to vanish completely. And I think it's good to be able to clearly communicate to people the reality of the Australian context around pesticides and how they can actually be engaged in it as well. So that, public engagement side of it is definitely a big component of my PhD. And we do want to properly understand which perspectives are actually out there in the Australian community, so that we can meet people where they are and hopefully take them to a better future for our waterways.
Mm. And you were teaching before this, and what were you teaching?
Science and also English. I was also
high school.
Yeah, in high school. Yeah, so I was teaching out in Point Cook. I was teaching there during the COVID lockdown times, and I think a bit of the restlessness that came with that sparked me to do some extra study on the side. So I went part-time at a school in Box Hill for a while I was doing my honours part-time for a couple of years. And that's when I did the pilot study to see if something like Pesticide Watch would actually be viable, whether we could actually get samples collected properly, returned to us, and high enough quality to be able to actually analyze them. And, are we likely to actually see pesticides at the sensitivity that we can achieve on those instruments? And the outcome of that was yes, we can. So my PhD project is really taking that to a full scale, a national scale. So we have about 130 sites around Australia now, compared to our much smaller scale pilot study that came from that honours project. And we've got about 600 samples mailed in so far, with many more to come in.
So what are the limitations on your current methodology?
Well, one thing is that we are just analysing water samples currently. Obviously, the water isn't the only component of a waterway. The sediment is where we'll find a lot of the contaminants of interest. For example, if I was to mention a historic pesticide, you'd probably say DDT. It's a very famous one, which Rachel Carson brought to light. That one's likely to be staying in the sediment. So a lot of our more persistent hydrophobic or water-hating chemicals will tend to stay in the sediment and slowly leach out into the water. So that we're not sampling sediment means that we're missing a piece of the puzzle there. Another obvious one is that we are collecting just water samples at one day, at one moment, once a month. So a lot goes on in the time in between. Our compromise to that is by collecting repeatedly every month for 12 months to hope that we can catch some of that temporal change. But obviously there are going to be gaps in between. Something that would be great if we had the money and ability to do it and the legwork to be able to do it would be to deploy passive samplers, they're called, little discs that you can pop into a waterway that will collect continuously over the course of, say, 3-4 weeks. And then you can extract everything out of that and analyze what it's caught during that time. So, yeah, that's something else that we're probably missing. But we hope that we're capturing enough of the story compared to what's been captured so far that we're adding a significant contribution to the monitoring landscape.
So what's the process with the community taking these samples, and do they send them in to you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, like I said, there's no probe-based sort of test or litmus paper test that you can do for pesticides, especially the range that we're looking at. So, they do have to send it into our centralized lab, which is in Burwood at the Deakin Melbourne campus. And so the samples are basically, we've sent out a kit to these people, and they're made up of some pretty inexpensive plasticware that helps us get a really high-quality filtered water sample. So that's collected by the citizen scientists just on their usual water quality monitoring that they usually do monthly, or at least monthly. So they'll collect a sample for us for a period of 12 months, and then they'll freeze it, keep it frozen, and then mail it into us frozen, where we'll then store it until it's ready to be analyzed in batches on campus.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now, we met on a photo shoot for Deakin University. We were taking photos of you in your field work. We've got a great photo of you with a drinking bottle at the end of a pole.
Yeah.
Is that your main tool for water sampling?
Yeah. It's probably not the most important one. I mean, you can get water out of the stream anyway. You can use a bucket and string if you want to. Most of the water quality monitors that are involved in our program have that water bottle on the end of a extendable rod.
Proprietary. Yeah.
That's right. It does look like a normal water bottle, but it actually says an analytical brand on it. Okay. So it's legit. But I think filtering the samples is one of the most important steps, because the instrument won't handle it if it's unfiltered. Mm-hmm. So the whole kit is just to deliver us a high quality, properly rinsed water sample.
Mm.
Yeah.
Once you have the sample and it goes in the machine, how much does the machine do the work, and how much do you need to do?
Well, I try to minimize the amount that I need to do, because when you're looking at 12 monthly samples for 130 different sites, every step that I have to do to the sample is a headache. It adds up very quickly. So at the moment, we've got most of our sample preparation happening on the instrument, which is fantastic. We got a new module installed not long ago, which means that we're able to do that and still achieve really good detection limits. So we're sort of down at the 1 part per trillion level, or sub that for some of our uh, targets of interest, which is amazing. Like, to put it into perspective, 1 part per trillion is about 5 minutes in a million years. So that's pretty impressive for minimal sample preparation.
Mm. So we're surrounded by about 270 degrees of Corroy Creek.
Yeah.
How does Corroy Creek rate in the level of polluted creeks or waterways in Australia?
Well, we don't currently have any samples coming in, so
Okay.
we'll feel free to send a
clean.
kit over to you if you're interested.
I'd love to see how it rates.
But if we want to think about, urban creeks, I'd say that urban creeks are in quite a lot of trouble in terms of the number of contaminants in them, and it's not just things like pesticides, but it's also things like increased turbidity, things like pharmaceuticals that are going into there, microplastics. So urban creeks are in trouble, but thankfully I've been surprised at the number of people who are engaged with looking after their local waterways in urban environments. So hopefully that's something that can improve over time.
What other things are you finding in the water?
We're finding some of the common culprits. Some people may have heard of them. Diuron is one of them, which we find quite a lot. Finding some triazine herbicides. They're the kinds of ones that are picked up in virtually every water monitoring program that's run not only in Australia but overseas as well. So some water-loving herbicides tend to be detected quite a lot. So we're detecting a lot of the common culprits. Yeah.
And how about other things? Like you mentioned caffeine before?
Yeah, we're screening for caffeine while we're going as well. And yeah, caffeine's something that Jules, one of my supervisors from the Warrnambool campus of Deakin, she was involved in a study that looked at pharmaceuticals around the globe. So they sampled, everywhere, including Antarctica. And even in those samples from Antarctica, they were finding caffeine, nicotine, some degradation products associated with nicotine. So everywhere these chemicals are being found, even where you wouldn't imagine them to be.
Yeah, I actually saw some kids swimming in Corroy Creek a few months ago.
Swimming, hey?
Yep. I hope they're still with us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I used to, this project, I used to take my dog down to Jackson's Creek near Sunbury and throw her in, let her have a swim. And these days I'm a little bit more reluctant to do stuff like that.
Yeah, lots of itching from my dogs when they'd go for a swim in the creek. Now, you've just been on a bit of a trip to New Zealand, I believe?
Yeah, we came back in February. So yeah, my partner's from Auckland. So yeah, we make a few trips there every year. So yeah, we spend a bit of time there.
Did you get out to some nature there?
Yeah, we went down to Queenstown for a bit and did the root burn track, which was great. Yeah, so we've started picking up those multi-day hikes. It's quite good to have someone to be able to do that with. And so yeah, we've done quite a few recently. We've done the Grampians Peaks Trail. We were just at the Great Ocean Walk a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, the root burn track was definitely a highlight, I think.
I've seen pictures. I haven't been, but looks pretty amazing.
Yeah,
very rocky mountains.
Yeah, pretty rocky. I think we may have missed out on some of the really dramatic views because of the weather that we got. Very drizzly, but there's a magic to that as well. The fog that settles down, and you get things revealed to you every couple of minutes because you're walking further into that little space that you can see. So definitely one that I want to do again. Yeah, fantastic experience as well, and nice huts. Yeah, pretty good huts they've got there.
Dock, they run the huts, don't they?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and they call it tramping rather than hiking.
That's right. Yeah, that's the word we have to use at home now.
Yeah. And how's the water quality over there?
Oh, well, the water's, I mean, if anywhere has pristine water, you'd hope that it would be Fiordland National Park in New Zealand. That being said, they still have signs up on the taps in all the huts that say you must filter this water, which I don't think is necessary. I didn't filter it. I was fine. It comes straight from a mountain, so hopefully there aren't as many anthropogenic stresses in those waterways, but yeah, those signs are still up there. So I think there's a awareness that we need to be careful with what we're drinking.
We've got a neighbour who's a plumber, and he's quite particular about Melbourne water, which I've always been told that it's the best drinking water in the world, and I tend to agree. I'm not biased, but I tend to agree. But he has triple filtration system not just his drinking water, but the mains water coming into the house.
Yep.
So all his clothes are getting triple filtered water, and his dishwasher and everything.
Yeah, I wonder if your neighbor is my friend John, because he does exactly the same thing. He's out in Sunbury.
There you go.
But he has, the triple filters out the front, and it's for, the mains water. So it's everything that goes into the shower, that rinses his vegetables, absolutely everything is filtered.
But what's your view on that? Do you think Melbourne water is up there, or?
I think it's okay. I think that Melbourne water is pretty high quality. Look, I don't know a huge amount about it, but I'd say it's good quality and it's monitored quite well. I'm not aware of any particular pesticide problems with tap water.
Are you testing for it?
No, I'm not currently.
You'd be the guy that would know.
Yeah, maybe that's it. Yeah.
Now, who's been an inspiration to you and driven you in your work?
I think an important person to have had on this project is Damien. So Damien's my primary PhD supervisor and was my supervisor for honours as well. Him and Julie Mondon at the Deakin Warrnambool campus. Pesticide Watch is really their idea. It just happened to be that I wanted to do a project at the time that they were discussing what they could do with this new instrument that they'd got hold of. And they thought we can analyze the pesticides, maybe a schools program. And then I came along saying, I'd like to do a project. And they thought, perfect, let's do this. So I don't think there would be this project in the same way without their input, and, very encouraging the whole way along. So, and highly knowledgeable, I don't know, a fraction of what they know in this space.
Right. What are the most common sources of pesticide pollution in our waterways?
Well, it's easy to think that it's just coming from monocultural intensive agriculture in the regional creeks, and then flowing from those sorts of places and coming down to urban environments. But urban environments are also a large source of pollutants as well, including pesticides. So I think it's coming from a diversity of different places. I imagine, like I say, there are lots of data monitoring gaps here, but I imagine that the sources of these, the profiles that we'd see in urban environments and regional places would be quite different. But that's yet to be seen. And I think definitely tracking point sources for these sorts of things is a way down the track. What Pesticide Watch is trying to do is just establish a baseline. So to be able to analyze for a lot of pesticides and understand what's there, then we can monitor change over time and potentially identify where these things are actually coming from.
What's your theory?
Well, I don't have one at the moment necessarily. I'd say overuse of pesticides in urban environments would be a problem for urban streams. How often do you walk past someone's front yard and they're spraying glyphosate? You go to Bunnings and you see the range of different, pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, rodenticides, all these things that are just available. There's a whole aisle full of them. For a recent survey that I was designing, I actually thought, and we didn't end up doing this, but I actually listed out all the different active ingredients that are available just on the Bunnings website. And it's over 100. Wow. So there are lots of different potential chemicals that you can get there. And really, after the point of sale, we don't really know what people are using them for or how much. And, they're relatively inexpensive. So I think that could be a source of pesticides entering waterways.
And absolutely everything that is purchased off the shelf ends up in the waterways, doesn't it? It eventually, it's going into the into the ground. But
I mean, like I say,
always going to make it in there.
Yeah, one of the points I always make about pesticides is that they're not one thing. They're a huge range of different chemicals. So they vary so much in terms of even their chemical structure, let alone their behavior. So some are, readily degradable. Some are persistent for decades. So some are in the system for a short amount of time. Some don't leave. Some are less toxic. Some are highly toxic. And, some are highly toxic to some things, but not to others. So it's hard to really say one conclusive thing about pesticides because it's such a range of different chemistries.
Do you have a preference that people would buy, like the active ingredient rather than the brand?
Well, I'd question whether you need to get an active ingredient at all, firstly. At the moment, I'm faced with a mice problem in my backyard. My compost bin is being attacked, and we probably spent close to $100 trying to solve that problem with meshing and digging up all the compost, putting it into a pile, attaching meshing. It's a hard job to do. Chuck it all back, hope that they don't come back. I can see mice running up and down trying to find their way back in, and they can't quite do it. But it would have been much cheaper to just pay 10, $15 and get a rodenticide, pop it there, and bait them. So,
which is an awful death for the rodent and potential death for birds and birds of prey and everything.
Yeah,
so.
And potentially unnecessary. So, yeah, hopefully that's true. But I think, we're hopefully going to be heading into a lot more of a chemical constrained world in terms of we'll eventually realize that these chemicals go somewhere and that they have an effect in the environment. And so hopefully the range that are available to us will reduce, and we'll have to be a bit more creative with our solutions.
What homemade solutions would you recommend? Like, let's just say I've never seen a bug on my balsamic vinegar dressed salad. Does that mean vinegar's the answer?
Well, potentially not. Although you can think about replacing some chemicals in your house. I mean, you just look under your, laundry sink and have a look at the range of different chemicals, even aside from pesticides that are in there. And, there's a lot that you probably don't actually need, but you use out of habit, out of inertia. So I think potentially there are changes you can make to just the chemical profile that you're then introducing into water. So, yeah, I think that sort of awareness is something that could grow for contemporary Australia.
Have you heard of using coffee grounds for snail deterrent?
I haven't heard about that one. I've definitely heard about the beer bottles for snails where they go in and drown, apparently. I've never actually used them myself. We just have netting around our vegetables in the backyard. But yeah, I've heard about all sorts of creative solutions that people have.
Yeah, and snail bait is awful. Like my dog got into rat sack when she was a pup, and I got her to the vet, and she had a shot and she threw up and was all fine. But then a couple of months later, she got into some snail bait. Not at our place; we didn't have it ourselves, and she was taken to the vet, and they went, "Oh, very good that you got her here, because rat sack can be about a week before they die. Snail bait's like hours."
That's terrifying, isn't it?
Terrifying, isn't it? So yeah.
Especially when there's other options available.
She's a lot less suicidal these days.
Yeah,
it's good.
That's a relief.
Yeah, so at that point I was like, we're never having snail bait in the house.
Yeah.
Now, what can the everyday person do to protect their waterways?
Well, like I said, the first thing they can do is probably have a look at what chemicals that they use in their everyday life and try to reduce the diversity and range and maybe the harshness of those chemicals. There are things that you can do. I know that a lot of groups advocate that people stop washing their cars in their driveway because all that surfactant flows straight down the stormwater and into your local creek. And you can see this if you walk down creeks on a weekend morning. You can quite often see foam forming in there.
Now, can you explain to our audience how the stormwater works? Because we see it directly here because we are 100 meters from the creek, and so I can see that from our gutter to the creek, it's a pretty straight tunnel.
Yeah.
But people, deeper in the suburbs, away from waterways, they just see it go into a drain and it disappears.
Yeah, so I think having that visual is helpful, a helpful analogy for what happens with stormwater. And, stormwater is going to become an increasingly important resource, I think, for a city like Melbourne as well. Our population in Melbourne grew by 140,000 the year 2023 to 2024, I think, which is, the size of Ballarat, basically. And we're going to keep growing. So our demand for water is going to be increasing. So stormwater, for example, is something that we might need to tap into. And, thinking about contaminants that could be in there, like pesticides, pharmaceuticals, plastics, and so on. PFAS, for example, that's those forever chemicals that is, they're causing a lot of anxiety for people at the moment.
Tell me more about PFAS.
PFAS, they're called per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. Basically, they're a completely man-made chemical group it contains hundreds of different chemicals, which are highly persistent. They have a carbon-fluorine bond, which is very hard to break down naturally. They're called forever chemicals because once they're in the environment, they're likely to just stay there.
Is this what we're finding in fry pans? Like
yeah, fry pans, for example. The Teflon thing is probably so Teflon is probably linked a lot with the PFAS story, and I think a lot of the injustice that's around PFAS is that it's virtually ubiquitous. It's everywhere. Even when we're trying to run tests for PFAS on the instruments we use, finding a blank for PFAS is quite hard because PFAS is everywhere. And some of these PFAS compounds have been linked with serious human health problems, including cancers. So, I think that it's man-made. There are great films on this sort of thing and documentaries about the PFAS story. And I think that the injustice of it being a ubiquitous problem that is entirely man-made and was covered up for quite a long time is something that frightens people. And now the difficulty of removing that from our water resources is quite tricky.
So why is community participation in science important in this kind of research?
Well, the community are probably who are most affected by this issue. Like I say, it's a ubiquitous issue. So it's this sort of contamination. I mean, water is the great linking thing. So a creek will flow through quite impoverished areas and through wealthy suburbs. So these are the resources that we really do all share. So the community has a really important role, and I think that currently the awareness and the effective communication that the authorities have been engaging with these people has been lacking a little bit. So I think Pesticide Watch is something that we hope will be able to bridge that gap. So bringing the public along is a really important aspect of Pesticide Watch. So we also want to make all the data that we find publicly available. So there's not a lot of publicly available data that's around, even where pesticides have been analyzed for. So that's something that we think is really important. They do that well in other countries. So, for example, the Netherlands have something called the Pesticide Atlas. And you can jump online and find a particular site that you're interested in. And they'll not only provide you with a range of different concentrations over time for pesticides in that particular site, they'll also provide interpretations for it as well. And I think that's something that's going to be really, really important for the future, is for that to reestablish that trust between the environmental regulators in Australia, the pesticide regulators in Australia, researchers, and the community, so that we can hopefully work together to innovate in this area and try to overcome some of those problems.
Are you working with the regulators on this?
We are talking with the regulators, so particularly the environmental regulators. So we are engaging with them, and we hope that sort of strengthens over time as our project grows.
Mm. And is the information, the data available to the public just yet?
Not yet. So we haven't fully analyzed data. We haven't fully received all the samples from our 12-month campaign yet. But when they do and they're published and peer-reviewed, we'll certainly be putting them up there, and not only making them available, but also running webinars, visiting the community, making sure that they can properly interpret the findings here and the significance of it. To say that to someone we found this amount of this pesticide doesn't really help them necessarily. We need to tell them what the likely risks are associated with that, when those risks are likely to be worse in terms of things like climate drivers. So I think we really need to help them interpret what the reality, the so what of that chemical being in their waterway.
So how does Australia compare to overseas with regulation?
Well, we do tend to be a bit slow off the mark to ban pesticides. I think the world leader for recognizing risks and taking regulatory action would be the European Union. So there are lots of chemicals which are banned in the European Union, which are still used in Australia, relatively unrestricted. Although interestingly, the European market is demanding that Australian grown produce don't use those pesticides anyway if they want to export to that market. So that's, exacting a kind of influence over here as well. But generally, we are a little bit behind, and we're following in the footsteps of people like the European Union and the US. So, for example, some of the...
Say we're falling behind the US.
I think we probably are
That's
for
concerning.
some.
I would have imagined the US being one of the worst.
The US EPA is some of the world leaders in terms of contaminant research. So they're doing a lot of really good work. So yeah, in Australia there are compounds like neonicotinoids, which have been banned in the European Union for their detrimental effects to pollinators, which are still used here relatively unrestricted. In the UK, they were allowed for a while under some emergency measures with the more conservative government, but since the new government has come in, they've banned it completely. But they're still used here. They're still being detected in our waterways, and neonicotinoids are still being detected in sensitive ecosystems like the Great Barrier Reef. So they're still having an influence over here.
How about some good news? What good news do you have about this research?
Well, I think it's the community involvement, firstly. And I do think that we are moving in the right direction. You look at the Nature Positive Plan, which the government's trying to get through a second time around now. They want to bring in a National Environmental Protection Agency, which should hopefully tighten up the regulation in Australia around these things, and I hope reestablish some of the trust between the government and the community, and bring researchers along with that as well. So yeah, that's something that's good news, I think, is that we're moving hopefully in the right direction rather than making things worse.
And what happens when you finish your PhD? Will it continue on?
Yes, I hope so. Yeah, the intention is for Pesticide Watch to be an ongoing program. So we do hope that we can attract enough interest to then be able to make this ongoing and to expand it even further, to add more sites, to make it more sophisticated, to add more targets into our list. So we can analyze for pharmaceuticals as well, potentially microplastics, PFAS. I'm sure that there's an appetite for an analysis of all these things. So yes, that's the intention, for this to expand further.
These spectrometers, that's what you're using?
Mass spectrometers.
Mass spectrometers? I assume they are looking at it. They could look for everything, not just pesticides.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah. So you can, we definitely purchased that instrument using a PFAS grant. So it can analyze for PFAS. While I'm running my samples, I'm just screening for PFAS. One of the problems is that the kit that I designed, the sampling protocol, is for pesticides, and it's been validated for pesticides, but it won't necessarily work for PFAS. But I'm just checking to see if it's there anyway, as I'm going along.
A few extra keystrokes and find it's more effective.
That's right. Something like that.
So who would you be proposing to fund this kind of research?
I think there'd be a lot of interested parties. I hope that they get in touch with us when they're ready. I think it's a valuable project.
I think so too. So what's got you excited for the future?
I think community participation in science is something that excites me for the future. I had no idea before I started this program how many people were actively engaged in water quality monitoring, but also side citizen science projects as well. Things like, the Great Platypus Search was a good one that lots of people have been involved in. There's the shorebird monitoring program, which has been going for years. So I think knowing that there's a lot of people who are engaged, a lot of people who are following these issues regularly, who know so much more than we do. That's the thing that excites me when I speak at public events, is the questions people ask are so sophisticated. They really know a lot about this issue.
Should have got them on instead of me.
Yeah, probably. So I think that's what excites me, is that I think the public is becoming increasingly engaged, and that they're gaining more knowledge, that their scientific literacy is improving as well. So their ability to interpret this stuff is becoming more sophisticated, and I think that we can actually make a difference by bringing the public along. these days.
Right. What are the challenges ahead?
Well, I think the main challenges are the contaminants themselves. They're increasing in number and diversity. I feel like there's always going to be a new challenge, and for the regulators to be keeping up with the number of chemicals that are being added to the market is a challenge for them. Um, so I think that's a challenge. I think the complexity of the pesticide context in Australia is definitely a challenge as well. You look at things like, growers have to, face the challenge of increasing resistance of pest species and weed species to the chemicals that they're applying. And at the moment, they probably feel like their best approach is to increase the amount of pesticides that they're using for the short-term gain. And there's demand for new pesticides to enter the market to fill those gaps. So that's a complexity that growers are already under a lot of stress because of a range of different issues, including climate change and the price of running their operations. The range of different vested interests at play here as well. So of course, we have big pharma, there's big pesticide as well. So I think that's also going to be a challenge for the future to make a difference in this space. But all the while this is going on, the environment's degrading further. So it is a complex landscape. And I think that there are innovations happening in this space, which are quite exciting. The CSIRO, for example, is working on a platform at the moment, which it's called the Pesticide Use Risk Scenario platform that they're developing. You can look it up online. It's yet to be launched, but it's a way of growers being able to track things like resistance, to be able to properly look at alternative solutions rather than chemical inputs to treat for some pests. So I think that something like that is an innovation which is moving in the right direction to try to reduce the amount of chemical inputs that we have.
So this is the big one. How can people get involved with Pesticide Watch?
So, like I say, we hope that Pesticide Watch is an ongoing program. That would be great. So we'll hope to be having intakes again soon. We're in the middle of a 12-month survey at the moment, so that'll take another 6 months or so before we're finished up with that. But we will be having more intakes in the future, hopefully expanding it even further. So keep an eye on the project if you want to sign up. One of the things you can do today, though, is contribute to a questionnaire that we've put up on our website and our Facebook page, which is really about understanding the perspectives which are currently out in the community about pesticides and chemical contamination. So it takes about 15 minutes to complete, fully anonymous, and it's really just about understanding where the community's at. Do they trust the regulator? Do they buy pesticides themselves? So we want to know all that sort of information and to understand where these perspectives are coming from, how much diversity there is, how motivated people are to change the way that things are at the moment. So that survey is available on our Facebook page and the website. And that's going to be a huge contributor to our baseline study of what pesticides are out there and where the community is.
We'll have that website address in the show info. So we're highly focused on climate change in the community. How would you like the story to be told about contaminants in our waterways?
I think I'd like to be told more compellingly. Like I always compare climate change in the contaminant space because some people say the negative environmental effects of contaminants are actually increasing more rapidly than something like CO2 emissions. Not that they're necessarily comparable in that way, but it's definitely an important issue. And I think almost any school kid would be able to give you a compelling argument about why climate change exists, where it comes from, the general mechanisms of it. But if you compare that to another serious environmental issue, how contaminants arise, where they go, and why they're there, what effects they're likely to have, I think that they'd be more at a loss. And I think that comes down to some poor storytelling on the part of people working in the contaminant space. I wish that we did more community outreach and that we tried to help people interpret this issue better than we are. If we ask a general member of public about a pesticide that they know about, they're likely to mention DDT. And the reason that is because Rachel Carson, a nature writer who wrote really well, wrote a book in the 1960s called Silent Spring, which, a lot of people say sparked the environmental movement. But it was written in a very compelling way. And I don't know whether we're getting that same compelling storytelling about contemporary pesticides and what we can do about it.
You were teaching science and English, weren't you?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It's your time.
Yeah.
Write that book.
Yeah. Maybe it is. Yeah, it's time.
And lastly, what would be your top waterway in the world you'd like to visit?
To visit. Well, I love Germany. Let's say the Danube would be fantastic to visit.
Okay.
Yeah, lovely.
Interesting. Well, Brady, thanks so much for joining us today to Ascend Your Story.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been great.
Thanks to the Ascent Media team for putting the show together, Jonathan Brown, Michael Nguyen, and Nico Scott. I'm Sam O'Reilly. Ascend Your Story is an Ascent Media production. We tell the stories of amazing people in science, tech, research, and more through video, photography, live streaming, and podcasts like this one. You can see our work and check out all of the other episodes at ascentmedia.com.au.